The model that we've used to independently finance movies for the last several years has been, if you take 100% of the financing pie, 20 to 25% of it was going to come out of rebates from states or foreign countries in which you could shoot the movie. Another 50 to 60% was going to come out of foreign pre-sales of the movie. And that would leave somewhere around 20% to 25% of the film to be financed out of equity. In general, because over the last 4 or 5 years, the studio and the sub-studio distributors have, rather than getting invested in these kinds of movies before they're made, have taken the position that they'd rather not take that risk, and they'd rather buy the movies even at a premium after they've actually seen them. So when you're putting the financing together for a movie, it's hard to ascribe very much value to the domestic market, which may in fact be the biggest market for the movie, because you have no certainty that you're going to get distributed, and the minimum, and I've had this happen to me, the minimum value of a movie that you make that doesn't have significant domestic distribution is very, very small. So as a result, you're often forced into a case where you're crediting very little money to the domestic market in your financial model. So a few things have happened to change that landscape in a very, very serious way. The sub-distributors continue to be, and the studios continue to be, totally reluctant to get involved at the development stage or the production stage or the pre-production stage of a movie. So you're still not guaranteed, in most cases, any distribution. The rebates from the states, in certain cases, have become nervous. New ones have come on. Louisiana, which was very powerful, it lost its rebate for a while and then came back with a rebate. And Georgia, where everybody goes, has become an extremely expensive state to shoot in. And so it's pushed movies to either go to odd places to shoot that don't necessarily work for the movie creatively, and they're limited, and where they're going to be 2 or 3 years from now is completely unclear. And most of those rebates are below the line. They rebate on the below the line of the movie. They don't rebate on above the line. Some do. Georgia does, and Louisiana has historically. Ohio does. But for example, Canada does not. New York does not. So if you have a movie that's heavily above the line, you have highly paid stars, highly paid actors, you're not getting very much in the way of you're not getting anything in the way of a rebate for the above the line talent. So you have this reluctance of any domestic distributors to put up any kind of money, and they're in a I'll see you at the festival kind of attitude. You have the rebate portion, which was very substantial, kind of in question and driving you in odd directions and fighting against any kind of movie where you're paying talent a lot of money. But the real problem is that the foreign sales market, which was anywhere from, as I say, 40 to 60%, let's call it 50% on average, of the financing model for an independent film has completely fallen apart. Over the last 4 or 5, 6 markets, Berlin, AFM, Toronto, Cannes, the foreign distributors who are either not coming, which was in the case of AFM, the most recent AFM, or they are coming and bidding very scantily on movies, or they're bidding so low that you rarely are getting your ask, and in many cases they simply don't want the movies. So that 50% is it's a chimera. I mean, right now, I mean, it's something that is very difficult to achieve, except on a very high profile film. And so if you're only getting 20 or 30% of the financing of the movie from foreign, or you're getting nothing, which is often the case, that would have to be made up in equity, and you simply do not have equity players who are willing to take the kind of 60-70% risk on a movie that's, say, $15 million, and they just won't do it. So I think what's going to happen is that if this doesn't change, and it's difficult to see what is going to change about it, it's going to drive independent film into lower and lower budget ranges where the equity risk is relatively low. But that is going to constrain, for sure, the type of movies that are being made. I just was asked on a movie to reduce the budget. And, you know, I've always made movies at a price. But the people who are asking this they just simply have no concept of what it actually costs to make a movie. And I said, you know, no, I'd rather not make the movie than try and make some piece of garbage that will disappear on VOD, and I won't do that. At this stage of my career, I don't have to, but a lot of other producers don't have that kind of flexibility. So I'm very, very worried about the future of independent film when it gets to movies that I think the studios would have made 20 years ago, 25 years ago. We just finished a film called On the Basis of Sex, which is the story of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, so the origin story of Ruth Bader Ginsburg when she took and won in 1971, at the age of 35, the first case that declared discrimination on the basis of sex unconstitutional. It was a terrific script. It's 3 periods. It starts in 1956 in Cambridge at Harvard. It goes to New York and Washington, D.C. in 70 and 71. These are not inexpensive periods to recreate, you know, and I hadn't done period in a while, and I went like, oh, Bob, you could have remembered how many period cars you need and how many extras have to be dressed, and the cost of doing that in a way that actually convinces the audience that you are where you say you are. And that's a real cost that isn't simply something that you can drive down and down and down and down and down. To me, the movie cost $3 or $4 million more than what I had estimated in my mind, which is a pretty good way of estimating a minimum cost. I've been really good at that. Fortunately, we had a semi-studio, kind of an independent studio, Participant Films, Participant Media behind us, and we had distribution because of Participant through Focus. So the movie made economic sense. This is not a movie that you could have made, as much as it was absolutely bid after by independent financiers. I think in the end they would have found putting up the equity to actually make this movie without domestic distribution in place, without foreign output deals in place, would have been probably impossible. It's a perfect example of sort of we got through just before the toll booth closed, and I worry about, because those are the movies that I make movies that, even if they're character driven, are visual and have multiple locations and things are going on in them. They're not two people talking in a room, and you cannot drive down the budgets on those past a certain point without compromising the film. Those are the movies that I think are in desperate chance of disappearing. And you are then left really with the auteur-driven movies that somebody makes for $2, $3, $4 million max. And I think, and then studio movies, which are $100 million movies or $80 million movies or $300 million movies, that are about something else completely. And I believe this. I believe this crisis, if there is no solution to it, will hasten the I wouldn't say the demise of the film business, because movies are going to be around, but it is going to make movies, it's going to hurt the audience, it's going to hurt the whole movie business irreparably.